Crab fishing in the Bering Sea should go without saying, but it is one of the most dangerous occupations and one of the most dangerous things a human being can do.
Something happened on Jake Anderson's deck on the deadliest catch that left the entire ship shaken, and it started with one sentence no captain ever wants to hear. It wasn't a storm, equipment failure, or careless seamanship. It was something far worse, the kind of moment that makes a seasoned captain freeze in place. What happened on the deck? I can't feel my legs. It's early October 2024. The FV Titan Explorer was in the middle of absolutely nowhere, but Captain Jake Anderson was used to this, and so it didn't stop him from pushing harder than he had to. Jake had tasted both success and failure, and he knew which tasted better. And at that time, failure stared at him in the face. He was 30,000 crabs short of his quota, and if he didn't deliver, he was going back to square one. After losing the FV Saga the year before, clawing his way back from being jobless and finally becoming a minority owner of the Titan Explorer, Jake Anderson fished like his entire future depends on it. It did. As Jake pushed hard, he reminded his crew to be safe because it was at times like that accidents happened. Jake has been in the fishing industry for 18 years. He has seen what happens when people get careless, but knowing when danger wanted to strike and having experience sometimes didn't cut it. During a routine haul, as crab pots were being transported across the deck, one of them broke loose. The cage, weighing as much as a grand piano, slams directly into deckhand Chino's head. The impact is brutal. Chino goes down screaming, and then he says the words that every fishing captain dreads hearing: "I can't feel my legs." The nearest hospital is hundreds of miles away, and the waters were too rough for a helicopter evacuation. What was Jake going to do? Jake rushed to the scene, and along with the crew, he began to move Chino. They shouldn't have, because Chino likely had suffered a spinal injury, but what choice did they have? Leave him on deck where another wave could send equipment sliding into him? Where the freezing spray could cause hypothermia? Sometimes there are no good options, only bad ones and worse ones. Inside, they lay Chino on his back and Jake strapped a neck brace on him, but the danger was far from over. Jake didn't waste time. He got on the radio to call the Coast Guard, sharing their coordinates, explaining the situation. His concern for his crew members' well-being leads him to consult with a neurosurgeon via radio while coordinating with the show's producer who's present during the emergency, and then tensions flare. Because Jake Anderson knows this is serious, he knows Chino needs professional medical evaluation immediately, and he's stressed, exhausted, and terrified that he's about to watch another person suffer on his watch. The producer is trying to help, trying to assess, but Jake snaps. Medical decisions should be left to professionals, he insists, not cameramen, not producers. Despite the tension, they manage to stabilize Chino's condition. Initial checks reveal that while his blood pressure is higher than usual, he could move his fingers and toes. That's good. That indicates some mobility despite the worrying symptoms. But it's not enough to keep fishing. It's not enough to chase the quota. Jake Anderson makes the call that every captain in his position hopes they never have to make. They turn the boat around, sacrificing valuable fishing time and sacrificing potential earnings. The Titan Explorer sets course for Dutch Harbor. But here's the thing that makes this scary. This isn't the first time Chino has faced danger. Just weeks earlier, he had fallen off the boat, and with how hypothermia quickly sets in because of how cold the water is, he could die. But fortunately, he had been knocked on top of the crab pots by a wave. Chino was shaken, but he was alive. 2 brushes with death, but Chino survived and went back to work. But the dangers of the Bering Sea remain ever present. Even captains aren't immune to it. When captains unite. In October 2025, Captain Keith Colburn, helming the FV Wizard, was having a tough time at sea. Then suddenly a 25-foot swell had sent him kidney first into the galley counter. The pain was immense and he needed medical care, but first he wanted to catch 100,000 pounds of crab before returning to town. That's the mentality out there. Finish the job first with your broken body and fix it later, but Keith wasn't having much success and neither was Jake Anderson. So Jake and Keith did something not completely unusual. They agreed to share intel with each other in an industry built on competition, where every captain guards their fishing spots like state secrets. This was huge. They contemplated whether they could trust each other. Would one captain use the information to poach the other's territory, Would cooperation turn into betrayal? Almost immediately after making the agreement, Jake's fortunes turned around dramatically. A pot came up with 134 crabs, then another with 180. Jake hit the jackpot, and suddenly he's regretting that phone call to Keith. He starts debating his next move. What should he tell Keith? If he reveals this hotspot, will Keith swoop in and take over the area? Jake's worried. He's got the golden ticket, and now he has to decide whether to honor his word or protect his territory. But then the decision gets made for him. Suddenly, it happened. Deckhand Andres messes up his arm. It's bad. His bicep swells up, bruised severely. Jake has no choice. He has to set course back to town. This is another crew injury, forcing him to abandon fishing. The pressure is mounting, and now he's losing time again. Jake alerts Keith about the situation, and here's where it gets interesting. Jake reveals the crab hotspot. He could have kept it secret. He could have told Keith to figure it out himself, but Jake plays it straight. He shares the location. In appreciation, Keith tells Jake he'll spot-check his gear while Jake's away, make sure everything is tightened up and ready to go. Andres is dropped off to see an orthopedic surgeon, and Keith follows through on his promise. He checks Jake's gear. He sees his numbers go up in Jake's spot, but he also leaves room for Jake. Then Keith spots something that changes everything. A 300-foot fishing boat with massive nets approaching their territory. This is a threat. Trawlers drag nets along the ocean floor, and if they run through an area where crab pots are set, they can destroy tens of thousands of dollars worth of gear in minutes. Keith immediately contacts Jake. The two captains, who were just competing against each other, suddenly have a common enemy. They plan to work together to chase the trawler out of their territory, and they have to do it fast because Keith spots more boats coming in. A whole fleet of trawlers could follow. Keith thought of something. They set some gear tight just below where the trawler is working. 10 pots to a mile, overlapping. The hope is the trawler will run into this cluster bomb of empty gear and decide the area isn't worth the risk of snagging their nets. It's a gamble. It's also borderline aggressive, but it works. Looks like Jake was right to share after all. After their success, Keith went back to Dutch Harbor to see a doctor and find out how bad his back is. The injury that echoed a death. Unfortunately, the injury count kept piling up. In April 2022, Captain Rip Carleton of the FV Patricia Lee was setting crab pots in the rough seas of the Bering Sea. Anyone who's watched Deadliest Catch knows that rough seas is an understatement. We're talking about waves that tower over the boat and winds that feel like they're trying to rip the vessel apart. The conditions were so terrible that standing upright is a challenge, let alone working with 700-pound steel cages. Then suddenly, a rogue wave hit the boat. It wasn't unusual, but this wave was powerful enough to dislodge a crab pot from the launcher. The pot, weighing 700 pounds of welded steel, slid across the deck, and crew member Francis Katungan was in its path. He was crushed, pinned between the pot and the railing and unable to move. Francis screamed in pain. Rip raced to the scene, but he wasn't just dealing with an injury, he was dealing with trauma. Because just 1 year earlier, crew member Todd Kochutin had died on this exact boat from a similar incident. Todd had been hit by an 800-pound crab pot in February 2021. He was only 30 years old. Now it was happening again. Captain Rip was visibly shaken, fearful of another fatality. The entire crew rushed to bring Francis inside to safety as he dealt with incredible pain. News of the injury spread through the fleet over the radio. The situation was dire. Francis had visible injuries to his pelvic area, and the pain was overwhelming. But here's the problem. They were too far from land for a normal rescue. The weather was getting worse, and Francis needed a hospital immediately. Captain Rip made the call. He piloted the Patricia Lee for 16 hours to get within range of a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter. 16 hours. That's how remote they were. That's how isolated. For 16 hours, Francis lay in that cabin, dealing with excruciating pain, wondering if he'd ever walk again, while the boat raced toward the rendezvous point. Meanwhile, Francis's frustration was visible. Despite the pain, despite the fear, his mind was on the job. "I just want to finish this trip, finish this season," he said while awaiting rescue. "This is where I like being, right here. This is what I love doing." That's the mentality these fishermen have. Even when they're broken, even when they're potentially facing life-altering injuries, their thoughts are on completing the work. The helicopter rescue that followed was one of the most heart-pounding sequences ever filmed on Deadliest Catch. Captain Carlton had difficulty keeping the boat on course for the rendezvous point. The storm was massive. The Coast Guard pilot told Captain Rip how many people he had on board, just in case the helicopter went down in the water. That's how dangerous this rescue was. They were risking multiple lives to save one, but that's what they do. Francis Katungen was winched aboard the helicopter less than 3 minutes before it would have had to abandon the rescue due to lack of fuel. If the conditions had been slightly worse, if the boat had been slightly farther away, Francis might not have made it. But he survived. He ended up with shattered hips and a broken pelvis, and several months later, incredibly, he returned to the Patricia Lee. He came back to the same boat where he'd nearly died, back to the same job that had crushed him. That's either incredible courage or incredible foolishness. Maybe it's both. The incident completely rocked the FV Patricia Lee. Having lost Todd Kochutin and then witnessing Francis Katungen suffer a similar fate caused immense trauma for Captain Rip and the entire crew. It put everyone on edge. Further safety precautions were implemented, but the question lingered: how do you prevent accidents caused by rogue waves? How do you control nature? You can't, and that's what makes this job so terrifying. A catalog of pain. Francis Katungen's injury might be one of the worst, but it's far from the only one. Over 21 seasons of Deadliest Catch, the cameras have captured a horrifying array of injuries that illuminate just how dangerous this profession truly is. Let's start with Captain Keith Colburn's near-death experience. Keith discovered damage to the Wizard's hull while they were at sea. As captain, he couldn't just ignore it, he had to fix it. So he made the decision to dive under the boat in the icy Bering Sea waters. Imagine that, plunging into water so cold that it feels like knives stabbing your skin, with waves rocking the boat violently, trying to repair damage while hundreds of tons of steel loom above you. Keith was under the boat, working, when the vessel heaved slightly. As it settled back into the water, the 499-ton Wizard crashed against Keith's skull. The impact was brutal. His head was torn open, bleeding heavily. The crew pulled him back aboard. He was disoriented, visibly shaken, unable to recall everything that had happened. It took nearly an hour and 20 minutes for him to find his bearings again. Had Keith been positioned just slightly differently, the boat would have crushed his skull completely. He would have died underwater, trapped beneath his own vessel. The ocean's buoyancy saved his life, that and an incredible amount of luck. This wasn't Keith's only serious medical issue. Later, he had to take a sabbatical from season 14 after being diagnosed with a spinal cord infection called osteomyelitis. This bacterial infection causes inflammation of the bone, swelling, fever, and in extreme cases, septic arthritis. He had to take antibiotics every day while recovering at home, unable to captain his vessel. His brother Monty replaced him aboard the Wizard during his recovery. Then there's the unluckiest deckhand in Deadliest Catch history, Taylor Jensen. If there's a way to get injured on a crab boat, Taylor Jensen found it. He suffered not one, not two, but 3 successive injuries in rapid succession, each seemingly more painful than the last. It started with his ankle, wrenched and sprained under the force of 80,000 gallons of water during treacherous weather conditions. Imagine that 80,000 gallons. That's like being hit by a concrete wall made of water. Just when Taylor thought he'd endured the worst, he got hit by a crane that came loose during a hurricane. The crane was swinging wildly, and an 800-pound crab pot attached to it struck him in the head. Then, to add insult to literal injury, his finger was torn open in a coiler. The camera zoomed in on the hunk of flesh torn off his hand. The ship's doctor fixed the injury right on camera while Taylor writhed in agony, trying not to curse but ultimately giving in and letting loose a stream of profanity. Under the direction of his captain and with sheer determination, Taylor cut off the dangling skin himself, wrapped up his bloodied hand, and went back to work. That's not bravery. That's insanity. Or maybe it's just what's required to survive in this industry. In another incident, Taylor was accidentally hit in the head with a 30-pound steel hook after a fellow deckhand removed it from a crab pot. He took a few seconds to compose himself, then returned to sorting crab. Only later did he realize he was bleeding and finally stopped to get medical attention. Despite all of this, Taylor Jensen eventually became co-owner of the legendary FV Cornelia Marie. Just goes to show that hard work and a little spilled blood pays off. Or maybe it shows that the only people who survive long enough to become boat owners are the ones too stubborn to quit. Mike Vandervelt experienced one of the most stomach-churning injuries ever captured on the show. During Season 8, while working as deck boss on the Kodiak, Mike tripped while on deck and caught the tip of his finger between the launcher and a crab pot. The cameras didn't shy away. They zoomed in on his bleeding digit being treated by the onboard medic, and then they showed the severed tip of his finger lying on a paper towel, waiting for reattachment. Captain Wild Bill Wichrowski jumped into action, calling for a medevac back to Alaska so Vandervelt could get his finger reattached. He made it back to dry land in time. Finger and man were reunited. But the image of that fingertip on the paper towel haunted viewers for years. Then there was Cody Rhodes, who suffered a broken leg that was so severe the images are hard to forget. A 1,000-pound steel crab pot collided with his leg after the crew had spent 8 weeks on the Bering Sea. The cameras captured ghastly images of his leg turned 90 degrees, his lower leg and ankle blue and purple from bruising. Bones were clearly broken, and yet even in that condition, even with his leg grotesquely twisted, the conversation wasn't about getting him off the boat immediately, it was about whether they could finish first. No wonder the show is named The Deadliest Catch. Safety isn't promised. Safety measures, while improved over the years, still can't prevent accidents caused by rogue waves, equipment failures, exhaustion, and the simple reality that humans are fragile and the Bering Sea is not. You can't regulate away danger when the fundamental nature of the job is dangerous. There is something deeper about the men and women who do this work. They're not adrenaline junkies seeking thrills. They're not reckless. They're professionals who understand the risks and accept them because this job offers opportunities few other careers provide. A deckhand can make 6 figures in a matter of months. A captain can become a boat owner and build generational wealth. But they pay for it with their bodies, their sleep, their time with family, and sometimes their lives. If this story hit you hard, drop a comment below telling me which injury shocked you the most. Was it Chino's head trauma? Francis being crushed? Keith nearly drowning under his own boat? Let us know what made you hold your breath. Also, subscribe to this channel because we're diving deep into the stories that matter. Stories that would not only entertain you but also shock you. See you in the next video.